Hello and welcome to Armenian News Network GRUNG. I'm Armen Ashotyan, and together with 𝐀𝐫𝐸𝐿 Manoucharian, today we are continuing our discussions with different representatives of the Armenian political opposition in the aftermath of the November 9th ceasefire agreement. This episode was recorded on Sunday, January 17th, 2021.
Following the trilateral Karabakh ceasefire of November 9, all major political forces in Armenia, be that parliamentary or extra-parliamentary, except for the ruling party, condemned Nikol Pashinyan's agreement to the deal. While the dissatisfaction with the agreement is widespread, different opposition groups have put forth differing plans on what to do next. As a leading parliamentary party since the late 1990s, the Republican Party of Armenia has been in control of successive governments, sometimes through coalitions. For over 2 decades, the party lost its prominence in the December 2018 elections, but remained a vocal extra-parliamentary opposition group. Today, we will look at why and how the RPA has joined a coalition of opposition parties demanding Prime Minister Pashinyan's resignation, and what are the similarities and differences between RPA and other opposition parties. To have that discussion, we're joined by Armen Ashotyan, who is Vice President of the Republican Party of Armenia. From 2005 to 2007, Mr. Ashotyan was member of the National Assembly. From 2009 to 2017, Ashotyan served as Minister of Education and Science, and in 2017, he was elected to the parliament again and served there until December 2018 snap parliamentary elections. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Hello, dear colleagues. Hello, dear compatriots. I'm very glad to be with you tonight. Actually, it's night in Armenia, so I also welcome the Armenian and English-speaking compatriots that will find time to listen to this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Armen, it's been over 2 years since the 2018 elections that resulted in the RPA, the Republican Party's becoming an extra-parliamentary force for the first time in over 2 decades, as we said. There have been many questions about what exactly happened in 2018, so please tell us what happened in April, May, what took place in October, and then what happened in December?
This question is very reasonable because the catastrophe we face now here in Armenia, in our motherland, are rooted in events of 2018. And we can't treat the reality without going back and making the proper diagnosis. So 2018, we faced here in Armenia in reality a coup d'etat, so it was in fact anti-constitutional handover of the power. But for the foreigners and thousands of my compatriots, my naive compatriots here in Armenia, the bloody authors of this event have found very attractive branding. They called it Velvet Revolution. So from the very beginning, it was very clear for me and for thousands of Armenians and the foreign experts that it's not the revolution, first of all, and it's not velvet secondary. It was a takeover of the power, implemented, grounded on the dissatisfaction of the citizens of Armenia by the current social economic problem, feelings of injustice, corruption, etc. But in fact, it was misuse, abuse, I would say even, of these very objective, in some cases, feelings of my citizens here in my country. Okay. We faced, in fact, 2 versions of this takeover of the power. One was an export version, if I could say it, and it was very bright, colorful, picturesque, with the songs, dances, Armenian tricolors, smiling people, etc. But the internal branding, internal version of this takeover was in fact implemented by the organizers of this coup d'etat, by harassment, by moral and sometimes physical pressure on the representatives of the former government. So it wasn't a peaceful process at all. It was a process fed by hate speech, by hatred in general, by harassment, as I told you. And so it was, in fact, what I felt here and thousands of my compatriots here that...
Armen, I'm sorry, if I may, for our listeners, I want to say that the sequence of events. So in April, May, or specifically April 23rd, Prime Minister Serge Sarkisyan resigned based on popular pressure. So that's what I want to know about. Maybe what was the reason for that resignation, if we can be more open about it. And then what happened was that in October, there was some kind of an agreement between the parliamentary forces and pro-Pashinyan forces that had surrounded the parliament building, if you remember, October 2nd, to resign and prepare for snap elections. So what led to those moves, And then, of course, the December elections. If Sargsyan resigned...
I will try to be brief. I will try to be
Yeah.
brief. I'm not historian, but as a former member of the parliament, maybe I abuse your attention and take long speeches. So, just to summarize your previous question, at the very beginning of this event, namely 1st May, when Nikol was nominated first time as a candidate for prime minister, our party was totally against, and I remember I even delivered a speech saying that I will not vote for Nikol because I don't want Pashinyan to become the last prime minister of the independent Armenia or the prime minister who will bring disaster and catastrophe to this country. Unfortunately, I was reasonable, and the life proved that Pashinyan was wrong and we were right. So the reason of resignation of former President Sargsyan was very clear. Armenia, even at that time, was in very geopolitically complicated situation, and facing these mass protests which paralyzed also country in whole. Our government, our authority preferred not to implement legally possible repressive measures because it could lead to the hundreds of injured and killed. So we preferred to resign peacefully because we appreciated and we understood at that time as well that Armenia is in security conditions that could be abused by Turkey and Azerbaijan. And if you remember, even at that time, in media were many reports about Azerbaijani military forces pulling to the Armenian-Azerbaijani borders. And so any internal events, not peaceful events, that could divide further the country and society could bring disastrous consequences about Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia's security. So Sargsyan preferred to resign because the public opinion was very clear on that. People demanded that. And he went away to allow Armenian society, if I could say, to realize its new dream created and richly delivered by savior Nikol Pashinyan. So, as to the October 2nd events, I would like to make a very important comment here because you said that was any kind of agreement between Nikol Pashinyan and parliamentary groups. No, there was no agreement October 2nd. Because it was another anti-constitutional step authorized by Prime Minister to pressure on National Assembly, to pressure on members of the parliament. So there was no agreement to have these snap elections just after, because when from the very beginning Nikol Pashinyan formed the government and presented its first governmental program to the parliament, I mean it was mid of June, if I am not mistaken. The terms for snap elections in that program were written literally in 1 year.
Yeah.
So these snap elections were not actually legitimate because they were organized as a consequences of the anti-constitutional pressure on Armenian parliament, especially on October 2nd. So it's just to be clear for the history.
Yeah. So there was no specific agreement on the date or when the snap elections would happen, but weren't
exactly
there
because it was widely discussed also to reform the Electoral Code, and government at that time tried to do it very fast to speed up the process. They brought some package on amendments to the current Electoral Code, and as this package wasn't discussed with the parliamentary majority or parliamentary factions at that time, so we refused to accept these electoral code changes, and we proposed to have it done according to the best experience and European standards of Council of Europe, because Council of Europe has very strict advices, I would say. It's not legally binding, but it's a part of European political culture where Armenia pretended to be part of it, to reform electoral code, to have elections not sooner than 1 year after the new electoral code is adopted. So there are many details, and let's leave this part of Armenian news history to the experts and analysts. Let's don't make it more complicated, but if somebody is interested in details, it's easily Googled. The elections itself were not the best elections in Armenian history, as Pashinyan himself and his government claimed like to brand. No. Myself, I was candidate from the Central District and Erebuni District from the Yerevan, and I know on my experience, I felt it on my skin, and many my colleagues from my party and other oppositional parties as well, that the elections in fact were organized in atmosphere of euphoria, and you can't make a democratic choices, you can't make a reasonable, long-lasting political decisions in case you have society which is more sensible, feelingful than reasonable. So Nikol Pashinyan tried to seize the opportunity to capitalize his so-called revolution into the seizing the power of all branches. I mean, he already took at that time executive branch as a leader of the government, and now he was attacking the legislative branch of the power. And as his history showed after, it wasn't his last anchor, because after that, after he swallowed a National Assembly and put its own artificial and non-intelligent parliamentary majority in that building, after that, he organized a long-lasting attack on Constitutional Court, also trying to swallow and digest also the judicial part of the power. So Nikol Pashinyan tried to build authoritarian regime under commercial facade of so-called velvet democracy and blah blah blah. He was telling to the Armenian society and to his international partners as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Armen. The Homeland Salvation Movement, the group of the 17 opposition parties, have demanded the resignation of the Prime Minister. And as the party with the longest experience in power, you have refrained from putting forward your own candidate as interim PM and instead decided to support 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐬𝐢𝐭𝐡. Can you tell us why that decision was made in brief?
To be honest, the Republican Party was the opposition to the Pashinyan from the very beginning of his bloody term. So we didn't wait until this Nagorno-Karabakh war bloody and epic failure to announce our position on Pashinyan's government. From the very beginning, even being at that time in the parliament, we publicly launched our new oppositional branding, I would say, or role or mission in Armenian politics. At that time, Republicans were the only influential, visible Armenian political party in opposition to the Pashinyan. So for a long time, Pashinyan had no other opposition than Republican Party of Armenia. And after all events we also talked about, oppositional camp started to be enriched by other political parties as well. But from the very beginning, only Republican Party in political field and some social initiatives like 𝐻HK and other non-governmental social initiatives were trying to oppose themselves to Pashinyan's regime. Now we paid very disastrous and very painful price for this purification, I would say, of political will and political views of our citizens. And yes, we paid very, very high price for that. We lost, 75% of Nagorno-Karabakh Artsakh Republic territory. We paid tribute for the thousands of Armenian soldiers and officers killed during this war, and it was very high price to be paid by Armenian nation to understand that Pashinyan, who is a very dangerous populist from the very beginning, who also brought a national disaster compared only to Armenian genocide consequences. So as to the 17th framework, we are in the situation now in our country, in our motherland, when all or almost all oppositional parties have put aside all their previous differences, tensions, story of the relations, ideological differences. All differences are put aside because, thanks heaven, the majority, the core of Armenian political field, political elite, understands very clearly that we should be united all together in the fight against this hunger, against this boogeyman, because Pashinyan is a monster, he is anti-Armenian monster, anti-national monster, anti-Artsakh monster, and he should be dismissed as fast as possible. And having this idea in mind, mainly all Armenian oppositional parties, including RPA, as one of the biggest and most influential and visible political organization in my country, in our country, we are part of this mission. So 17 is not just an organizational framework, but 17 is a mission to dismiss the man who currently occupied the chair of Armenian governmental leader.
Let me just bring up one aspect of what you could differ on and let me know what you think. So Vazgen Manukyan has been critical of foreign-funded Western NGOs, and during his various speeches he has talked about more regulation for such funding. Does that also represent the position of the Republican Party of Armenia? And what other similar aspects do you think you differ or you agree on?
Let's continue from my side at least to be as frank as possible, having in mind my political background and also this framework of our conversation, virtual framework, but I will try to say the things to vocalize my ideas and thoughts as if you are in front of me and you are looking in my eyes. Republican Party of Armenia is up to now the most internationalized political party in my country. We are a member of the many influential political families around the globe. Just to inform our listeners that Republican Party, for example, is a member of European People's Party, which is a ruling party, is a majority party in European Parliament, which has also almost half of European Commission, including Ursula von der Leyen. So we are also a member of International Christian Democratic Union. So we are connected to the West. We were connected to the West as well as to the China, having a very good relations with Chinese Communist Party, and for sure for a long time we have very productive and efficient relations with leading Russian political circles, namely with the ruling party of Russian Federation, I mean United Russia. So we are up to now the most internationalized. We always try to serve exclusively Armenian national interests. For that, we build up a very strong and efficient network of political connections around the earth. Why I said this background to our listeners, because now during the war, and despite the fact that maybe some our compatriots would not like this idea, but we should say very clearly that West, the global West, I mean at least EU and US together, disappointed, mildly saying, diplomatically saying, disappointed deeply Armenian society, because this bloody war was full of anti-humanitarian actions taken by Azerbaijani leadership and army, was full of blood, was full of injustice. From the very beginning, so-called civilized world said nothing about the aggressor. They always try to formulate things in insipid diplomatic language. They tried to balance again during the war, knowing very well who is really guilty, who is really aggressor, and who is in fact the target and victim of this war. So
no, I understand that aspect, but specifically the question was about NGOs and quote unquote the Soros.
Coming back, so why I said this, I want you to understand better that the collective West, if I could call it like this, has lost here in Armenia, for Armenian people, for Armenian nation, for Armenian political elite, its moral authority, its moral ground to teach us, to help us, to prompt us, to advise us how to rebuild Armenia again. Because when Armenians were in need of help from collective West, we got nothing except for, and I'm very grateful for many European and American intellectuals, mass media representatives, politicians, who were vocal about the reality of this war in their countries. But unfortunately, political institutions of European Union and United States were not just towards Armenian statehood and Armenian people. Why I say that? Because you remember very well that so-called Velvet Revolution was very warmly accepted especially by Western part of the world. So they were very kind towards Pashinyan, delivering very attractive speeches saying that Armenia is building democracy, restarting fight against corruption. So Armenia is a flagman of the democracy in the world. Even The Economist, if I am not mistaken, put Armenia on the first range of the democratic countries, of democratic transited countries or something like that. But during the war against bloody authoritarian corrupted Aliyev regime, these so-called values didn't add any additional political added value to the perception of Armenia, of the Republic of Armenia, of Armenians in general in the West. So this disappointment is very deep, even for me, because in the party I am still responsible for international affairs. So it's not just inter-Armenian gossip or the rumors or talks. I had many opportunities to say all this, even in harder words, to my European political colleagues. So when we are now coming back to your question about Western financed NGOs, etc., it's very sure that Armenia, after change of the government, we should revise many laws. We should revise how to build, first of all, strong, not only society, but also state. Because we tried to be very liberal. Our government was one of the most liberal governments in the political history of Armenia. I mean, a government under auspices of Sargsyan presidential mandate. So.
Yes.
But, we could talk about society when there is statehood. Now Armenia, Republic of Armenia, is in the situation when de facto statehood is being eroded almost weekly, if not daily. We are losing territories on the borders, you know the story.
Armen, so the Homeland Salvation Movement has accused Nikol Pashinyan of treason for signing the agreement of November 9 and 10. And we heard your movement raise alarm signals prior to Pashinyan's trip to Moscow on January 11. And they warned that, I'm quoting, any decision taken against the interests of Armenia and Artsakh will be recognized as illegitimate, will be rejected by the Armenian people, and will not be ratified and will be annulled after the change of power. Do you believe the January 11 agreement to open rail communications was against the interests of Armenia and Artsakh?
It's very clear for any even middle qualified expert or analyst more or less acquainted with the South Caucasus geopolitics that yes, January 11 and November 9 agreements were against Armenian interests. It's so clear. Geopolitically, Armenia and Armenians used to have global political value because of the role of Armenia, both Armenian states, I mean the Republic of Artsakh and the Republic of Armenia, playing in interruption or disruption of so-called pan-Turkistic or pan-Islamistic or neo-Osmanic plans. So opening the border for the logistic communication between between mother part of Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan Autonomous Republic, it was a pan-Turkistic dream for a long time, I think since 19th century, and it could become a reality now. So Aliyev and Erdogan together, they are gaining everything they wanted.
If, as you say, Pashinyan is truly making moves against the interests of Armenia and he's truly a traitor, then many, and even among your supporters now, are wondering why isn't the movement more active in protesting last 2 months and removing Pashinyan over the last 2 months? Why haven't you been able to bring more people to the streets?
A very difficult question. I doubt my English allowing me to express the depth of the problems concerning this question. But I will try at least. So Pashinyan is a traitor not only because of the consequences of the war. He is a traitor politically at least. When we say traitor, we should distinguish clearly that on that stage, Pashinyan is a traitor politically. I have no doubts after the change of the government, we will have investigative committee on this war, on the last war. At that time, we could also speak about Pashinyan as a traitor legally, judicially. So he is a political traitor for the moment because, first of all, he has brought this war to Armenian nation. He provoked this war. He deliberately failed in diplomacy, spoiled negotiation process. He undermined Armenian positions during negotiations in the framework of OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs. He also provoked this type of war. So not only war itself, because the wars are a part of Armenian history, unfortunately for 1,000 years, but he has brought such a war. Not only just a war, but such a bloody, long-lasting war where Armenia and Armenians actually were facing Azerbaijan, Turkish, and Islamic terrorist or mercenaries trio almost alone.
And we covered that. But then the question is on you, and specifically, you're one of the leaders of that movement.
Now coming to the essence of your question, it's very hard, I guess, for Armenian society to switch its political preferences so quickly, because there is a deep disappointment in Pashinyan's regime, deep, but not obligatory that all this disappointment energy is for the moment actually transformed to the opposition camp. So there are more disappointment than the energy to dismiss Pashinyan. I should recognize that, yes. Thousands of Armenian families are still in sorrow, are still paying tribute to the victims from their families, from youngsters died or still lost during this war. As a man who served in army and military hospital during this war, I should recognize that it was a really drastic experience for me personally as well. So I can imagine the feelings, the thoughts, emotional situation for the dozens of thousands of the families who lost somebody or who has still a member of the family injured and not fully recovered after this war. Other point is that maybe this opposition framework is not so attractive to all Armenian populations disappointed in Nikol Pashinyan. As I said several times, 17 framework is just a political business card, if I could say, or introductory card or facade for the disappointment movement in Pashinyan. So it's not obligatory, as I said before, that all Armenian citizens, hundreds of thousands of Armenian citizens disappointed in Pashinyan could join easily this opposition framework. This disappointment is widespread, is nationally spread. You could say that it's very institutional. I mean, universities, political institutions, Academy of Sciences, local governments, NGOs, representatives of intellectuals. So it's widespread, it's very institutional. It's not still maybe personalized in the sense that could push these people to the streets or to the squares. But as you follow the situation in Armenia, Pashinyan himself has no possibility to make even a single move in Yerevan or in Armenia without providing himself with the thousands of the security service or policemen support, assistance to clear up the way, or even failed to visit the regions, some regions of Armenia, I mean Syunik. So Prime Minister is not legitimate anymore because he has no power in the country. He claims he's going to still run because he is not able to run, he is able to ruin, and he proved the second part of these sentences much better than the first part.
In 2018, when the current regime came on board, there was a certain level of euphoria, and Nikol Pashinyan has been able to keep the political choices offered to the Armenian people as if it is entirely black and white. It is the current regime versus the former regime, and anything against Nikol Pashinyan means former regime people. Is it possible that this has slowed down popular participation in the opposition movement right now?
Exactly. I tried to explain it in my response, in my reaction, but you formulated it much better, yes. To the point. There is such a side effect still of the events of 2018. Yes, there is, because Pashinyan ruled the country before the war as the most populistic governor in the world, I would say. This primitive, simplified version of the politics created and widely sold by Pashinyan here in Armenia to Armenian citizens. It's very difficult to change this operational system by another modus operandi, you know. So yes, there is this. Still, we could also refer to this effect as well, because this simplified version of the politics,
Right,
both local and foreign, also damaged, I would say, the political minds of the thousands of the citizens of Armenia.
so as a follow-up to Aspet's question, maybe we could talk about where to go next, because I believe a lot of opposition members or people who support the opposition want to find out, okay, what's next? If it's not people in the streets, if it's not some other visible action, what do you plan on doing next? That will make what you said true, which is that, you know, if it's in the interest of Armenia, and if more and more we're sinking deeper, and I'm quoting, let's say, some opposition thoughts here, if that is really true, then isn't there a need to take more drastic measures or different tactics?
More urgent action, because like you said, every day we are having more and more losses, more border delineations where villages are lost, etc.
I should say maybe that this, from the very beginning, I don't represent 17, okay, because I'm not institutionally connected with the board of the 17 parties. I was on military service.
Right.
So at that time when this camp, oppositional organization or movement were created, I was out of Yerevan, and so I can't speak on behalf of them. But I can tell you my own personal opinion as a vice president of the Republican Party.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say that 17 are not successful, because we could already record successes, I would say transitory successes of this movement. First of all, acceptance by Pashinyan the need of snap elections. So he is talking about snap elections anymore. It was pronounced publicly. So he is already thinking about next political moves. He has the power in Armenia he has before. So it's success of this oppositional movement. As I told you, Pashinyan is not legitimate anymore. He has no possibility to move freely around the countries. There is a widespread disappointment and anger towards not only Pashinyan himself, but also to the members of his political team, both on governmental and parliamentary levels. All of this, plus informational campaign launched by the oppositional forces to prove the reality, to show to Armenian society the real face of Pashinyan's regime, is also another part of the success.
But how does the Republican Party of Armenia directly contribute to the overall opposition spectrum to bring about regime change?
I would reiterate oppositional full support to the constitutional changing the government and the power in Armenia. But unfortunately, it's my personal opinion, it's very unpredictable in Armenian society how this public anger could flow out in case Nikol continues to resist so immorally to even the idea of the Republic of Armenia in the future as a sovereign state, even to the idea of Armenia and Artsakh again, to regain Armenia and Artsakh and its statehood.
Armen, you mentioned that Nikol Pashinyan is no longer talking about snap elections, but I believe they are moving forward with some changes to the Electoral Code, which they see as a necessary step before snap elections. So I wanted to get your opinion on what is your party's position on the currently discussed electoral reforms. And we discussed this briefly, but why didn't the Republican Party vote on the government's proposal in 2018 to reduce the threshold for political parties from 6% to 4%? Because that essentially cost you the elections. Do you have any particular position on the electoral reforms today?
The idea of the snap elections announced by Nikol Pashinyan is a very dishonest and immoral political maneuver. Nikol is trying to be reborn as a political leader, and he understands very clearly that after his inevitable resignation, he and his political force will not be able to regain the majority in the parliament, and he is still clinging to the armchair of the prime minister with the idea to organize the snap elections under the auspices or under the power of the current government. So this is an immoral and nasty political maneuver he is trying to implement, to exercise. He launched also some so-called political discussions with some other political actors, very small parties that consist of just one or two men actually. He is trying to revise electoral code, but this is a very artificial agenda. This is very artificial because nobody from the real opposition is going to discuss electoral code reform now, or as we pronounced very clearly on behalf of the Republican Party of Armenia, we are not going to take part in this show that Pashinyan is trying to set up. So we shouldn't be organized any parliamentary snap elections under the power of this government. And frankly speaking, first of all, it's not a time for elections at all. Country is divided, country is in crisis, country is bleeding, country is losing its territory, authority, its dignity, country is losing its sovereignty, social and economic situation is devastating here in Armenia. So it's only the crazy man whose only idea is to save the power could think about snap elections in Armenia, in the current Armenia, in Armenia under current conditions. So this is why the main idea of oppositional bloc is to have transitory government which will be able to stop all this bleeding, to stop this deteriorating situation in economics, in social life, in security, to reset really strategic relations with the Russian Federation. And after that, we could think about changes of electoral code if necessary, and prepare country for upcoming elections. So about elections are talking people who are mad on power, and Nikol Pashinyan and his gangsters. We opposition are not talking about elections because we are not launching this process because we want power, because we want parliamentary seats, because we dream to be part of parliamentary system. Not at all. So, and this is another evidence for Armenian citizens to understand who is really politician and who is really statesman. The man who is thinking about elections is politician Nikol Pashinyan, and opposition behave itself as a statesman, thinking more about country's future than about upcoming elections. So it's a classic of the politics.
Armen, I wanted to ask if Ser Sargsyan has any plans of speaking publicly soon. Just to remind everyone, he gave a press conference in August of last year talking about the April war. And at the time, I believe he said that the next press conference he would give would cover the negotiations on Artsakh. And I think that was planned for some time in the fall. But then obviously the war happened, and I'm wondering what Ser Sargsyan's plans are going forward.
It's totally true. Ser Sargsyan was back to the public politics because he never left the real politics, but he was back to the public politics last summer. In August, we launched a first part of the series of the press conferences we planned for Armenian society and Armenian and international media to cover, to answer all questions the public and international community could have. We started with the topic, by the way, of April war, and at that time some of journalists were asking me, why April war? It's not very interesting, it's not actual topic, it's not top priority. But from the very beginning we understood that this 2018 so-called revolution, but in fact takeover of the power, was because of Artsakh, was about Artsakh, and Nikol Pashinyan gangsters came to the power to solve the Artsakh problem in this way. So that is why the main topic, the first topic of the Ser Sargsyan's press conference was April war, and we publicly promised that we will have a second press conference about Nagorno-Karabakh negotiation process. And you are correct, this war changed the plans. After that, you know about the private tragedy, the loss of president's wife, Madame Rita Sargsyan, is dead because of coronavirus. And
Yes.
this also family tragic story also influenced the public political agenda of the third president of the Republic of Armenia. But I could promise you that quite soon, if not very soon, President Ser Sargsyan will be publicly back to the political stage. I can guess that the main focus of his upcoming public activity will be on Nagorno-Karabakh negotiations, war, and the future, how to take out the country and the nation from this deep hole we are put by the bloody populists in.
Armen, so as we close, I wanted to ask if there are any specific lessons that you drew from the December 2018 elections, and then what is your party's vision for Armenia after this intermediary period that you talked about, also specifically for your party within the new Armenia over the next 5 to 10 years, for instance? Do you still see yourself as a majority party, or are you thinking it will be more of a coalition government in the future?
I should confess again that from Republican Party of Armenia, this process, this situation, this reality is not viewed as a political opportunity, because we are not cynical to take this tragic reality as an opportunity at all. I want to repeat again that we publicly said that we have no intentions to come back to the power, but we have intention to save the country. Personally, myself, me and my colleagues, my friends from the party are not dreaming about any kind of position in a new government or even new parliament. It's not a priority for the patriotically thinking political circles in Armenia. So we don't think about elections. We don't need elections now. Because elections, as I told you, are the false agenda. We don't need elections now. We need a new government consists of professionals in each and every field, able to capitalize the deep potential of Armenian nation, to stop this devastating situation, to freeze this situation and try to reheat it by its own potential, by the wise political strategies, by rebuilding connection with international community, firstly and mostly in this situation with Russian Federation, but not exclusively. And so I have no political dream for myself, but I have a political dream for my country. I want Republic of Armenia to survive, and I want Republic of Artsakh to be rebuilt.
Thank you very much for your time, Armen, and thank you for our listeners. Talk to you soon.
It was my pleasure.
That concludes this Conversations on 𝐀𝐫𝐬𝐻 episode. We hope it was helpful in your understanding of some of the issues involved. We look forward to your feedback, including your suggestions for conversation topics in the future. Contact us on our website at 𝐀𝐫𝐬𝐻, or on our Facebook page, ANN-𝐀𝐫𝐬𝐻, or in our Facebook group, 𝐀𝐫𝐬𝐻-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. On behalf of everyone in this episode, we wish you a good week. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels, like our pages, and follow us on social media. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.